Now I am thrilled to introduce Bernie Houseward, who I hope is here because, oh good. You're not Bernie Houseward, you're Verna Aardema Vugteveen. Is Bernie here? Yes, oh good. I didn't see you come in and I would hate to introduce you and have you not be here. It'd be anticlimactic. Well, Bernie Houseward, if you don't know her, began reading by picking out words in Woman's Day magazine that she'd learned from Dick, Jane, and Sally, some of my favorites. Since then, she's never been without a book or books very nearby. After graduating from Calvin College and teaching American literature at Holland Christian High, she went on to graduate school in her other love, theater, gaining a master's degree from Montclair State University in New Jersey. Those two loves came together in her first library job, developing a puppet show and creative dramatics program for the Kent County Library. That led to pursuing a degree in library science from the University of Michigan, and she never left libraries after that, working as children's librarian for the Norton Shores branch of the Muskegon County Library, director of the Georgetown Library in Jenison, Michigan, and then segueing into school libraries at Northview Public Schools and Jenison Public Schools. But one of the highlights of her career was the years between 1986 and 1990 when serving as the youth librarian at Hackley Public Library. Always interested in programming, Bernie sought out authors to visit the library to introduce young people to the real faces behind some of her favorite books. While at Norton Shores branch of Muskegon County Library, the manager, Richard Vitisse, and Richard is here today too, look for the name tag, encouraged her to seek out a local author by the name of Verna Aardema. Over time, Bernie and Verna became friends, and each new book by Verna becoming a reason for another library celebration, which continued through Bernie's time at Hackley Library. Bernie says she's honored to be able to speak about the author she came to love and has now celebrated with this literary landmark, Bernie Houseward.
Thank you, Marty. It is a great honor to be part of this celebration. And I would like to thank everyone who made this possible, particularly Carol Madden, who first contacted me about the application for the literary landmark designation, and Paula Aardema Dufford, whose personal memories and collected articles about her mother added much to make this talk more interesting and accurate. No, it's ooh. My favorite memory of Verna Aardema is sitting in her Florida living room just after the publication of Borgita and the Coyote, howling across the room with my husband, Steve Pasteur. Not being all that familiar with coyote howls, and always concerned about the accuracy of telling her stories out loud, she was overjoyed to learn of Steve's hunting experiences in Wyoming, where coyotes howl through the night. As they continued their howling practice, Joa Vugteveen and I just looked at each other and shrugged our shoulders. But that was Verna, the consummate storyteller. And it was Verna, the consummate author. Her love for stories began early, as she writes in her biography for children, A Bookworm That Hatched, which has disappeared. Oh, no, just shove it back. A Bookworm That Hatched. As her mother read to the family of 9, Verna would sit near the back of the group so no one would notice the tears that spilled from her intense emotional involvement. At 11, her mother read a poem that she had written for school. Her mother declared, "Why, Verna, you're going to be a writer, just like my Grandpa Vanderven." This remark sent Verna off on a lifelong career of writing, so encouraged by her mother that it even got her out of chores. After dinner, she would take a few dishes to the kitchen, and then she would run off to the backwoods to her secret room in the swamp, where she would think up new stories. And indeed, she did just that, except for the days when she had young writer's block, and then she says, I would think and think until I thought my sisters must be finished with the dishes. Her passion for writing led her to Michigan State College, where she took all of the writing classes available and won 3 writing contests. However, intending to be a writer did not sit so well with her father, who decided she needed to go into teaching because he said, "You'll never be able to make a living by writing." So she went into teaching and eventually taught for a total of 25 years, one in Pentwater, some for Muskegon, and most for Mona Shores. In 1936, Verna married Albert Aardema and was placed on forced leave from teaching because she was now a married woman. That lasted for about 10 years, during which time they had 2 children, Austin and Paula. Later, she also added staff correspondent to the Muskegon Chronicle to her career, yet still found time to teach Sunday school and add several association memberships to her busy life. How does all of this relate to becoming an author? Well, back while working in the journalism office at Michigan State, her boss would request that she go to the library and find books about countries, different countries for him. Naturally, a self-professed bookworm must have looked at some of these books. But of all of them, those about the African continent most captured her interest. She then read all she could about that subject that was available at Hackley Library and beyond through the help of the reference department. But the person most responsible for her writing career was her daughter, Paula. A finicky eater, Verna discovered that she could keep her fascinated by telling her stories while surreptitiously spooning in her scrambled eggs. But Paula, being a smart little girl, quickly caught on to this gimmick, and by the 4th or 5th retelling could make those eggs last all the way through Goldilocks and the 3 Bears. Some new stories were needed, stories where Paula had no idea when the end was going to come, stories set in that far-off place of interest, exotic Africa, about which Verna had been reading. She was encouraged by an editor at Coward McCann Publishers, to whom she had sent one of these feeding stories, to use the story as a chapter in a children's novel. Not easily coming up with the second chapter, Verna instead turned to folk tales. In the 1960s and 70s, folk tales from Africa were seldom found in youth collections. And this is where Hackley Public Library became critical. Reference librarians were kept busy researching and acquiring books all over the United States on African anthropology. Verna would then search those books for tales. While searching, she also discovered the use of idiophones, words that imitate sounds, giving Hackley librarians another subject to search for her. Without them, the explosion of multicultural folktales, of which Verna was a pioneer, might never have happened. Unfortunately, these tales were written by anthropologists, for anthropologists, not for children, and certainly not for American children of the 20th century. Verna's real talent lay in finding the right story that could be retold, remain honest to the original, and yet appropriate and interesting to today's children. This was not always easy, and often took keeping things in the back of her mind for several years. The style of her tales were inspired by the oral tradition from which they originated. She was delighted by the unusual and charming tales that came from, as she writes herself, that infinitely diverse continent Out of its jungles, deserts, and great plains come tales that to us are comparatively new. They have not been done over and over. Her tales are filled with the rhymes and rhythms of its people. Some relied on ancient proverbs and archetypical characters such as Anansi the spider. Most contain repetitions easy for children to learn. And almost all contain her signature idiophones. These techniques made her books not only unique, but stories that begged to be read aloud. Her dedication to the story, to maintaining, yes, and the kids still love her stories. Her dedication to the story, to maintaining accuracy, to choosing the best words, to keeping the spirit of the tale alive as she moved it across continents and time, is evident in the quality of her writing. That quality has been recognized by major reviewing agents who gave most of her books starred reviews and included them each year at the end of the year in the notable book lists. By parents who keep her or who want to see her materials on their family bookshelves. By librarians who keep her books on their shelves even now, 30 to 50 years later. But most importantly, by the children themselves. For in the telling of the story, she demonstrated her sense of humor and commitment to writing a tale that children would beg for again and again. In 1976, her most notable tale, Why Mosquitoes Buzz in People's Ears, won the prestigious Caldecott Award for the best illustrated book published in the United States the previous year. Although the award is for illustrations, I have yet to see a Caldecott Award given to a beautifully illustrated but poorly written book. The excellence of writing and illustration always meld together. Bringing the Rain to Kapiti Plain was featured in the first season of Reading Rainbow for the public broadcasting system. And Boragita and the Coyote also became a Reading Rainbow book, ensuring a long life for both books. And in the year 2000, Why Mosquitoes Buzz in Children's Ears was named one of the 100 books that shaped the century by School Library Journal. These are but a few of the many awards her books have earned. Her books have been published in 11 different languages, including Japanese, Korean, Afrikaans, and Zulu, as well as recorded in audio and video by such luminaries as James Earl Jones, Ruby Dee, and former First Lady Barbara Bush for her radio broadcast, Mrs. Bush's Story Hour. But for me, the most wonderful book of all is Bringing the Rain to Kapiti Plain, because in a small way, I was involved in its evolution. I had given a talk about excellence in children's books. One of these books included the rhyme, The House That Jack Built. That night, the next door neighbor's dogs barking kept Verna awake, and as she lay there, a story kept 10 years in the back of her mind came to the front. Like Jack, it was a cumulative tale by the Nandi people of northern Kenya about a herdsman who, like those of his culture, leaned on a staff while standing on one leg and who saved his people from a severe drought. But he did this by throwing goat's dung into the dark cloud, which threatened but failed to bring rain. Not suitable for 20th century kids, to be sure. But then it came to her. Why not use an arrow? The story would remain true to authenticity and yet speak to today's children. And overnight, the story was born. She says, It was as if this story rolled out of my typewriter, written in rhyme. I count it as my best example of inspiration, a gift from God. The next morning, Verna took the story and showed it to Richard Vitisse, Norton Shore's branch manager, to ask if it might appeal to his young son and daughter. He loved it. Then Verna showed it to me, and we agreed that as written, it would make a wonderful, easy reader book, a style that was just beginning to become popular. After making a few adjustments, Verna sent it off to her agent. The agent requested that Verna write an introduction to the book, explaining the reason for the drought, but did not change one word of the verses as they were written. The agent also determined that it would make a better picture book. And when the book was finally published and Verna presented me with a copy, imagine my surprise to discover it was dedicated to my librarian, Bernice Houseworth. Never before or after. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Never before or after have I been so honored. But again, that was Verna, a person of such generosity and of such humility. She so freely shared her abilities, countlessly telling her stories over and over again to new audiences. To this day, her voice still sounds in the back of my head when I read or tell her stories. Always humble, she never sought the glory she so often received, always gave credit to her sources, and always gave credit to the one she believed as the source of all inspiration and creativity, God, with whom she partnered to bring her stories to life. We have been blessed by her life and talent. How grateful we are that her words will live on forever, bound between two covers, captured on CD and DVDs, and always alive in the hearts of those who have been bound and captured by her life and work. And now she will be additionally honored by this literary landmark designation for Hackley Public Library, a place she loved. Now that's something to howl about.